as this night begins, and the Democratic votes are not in yet, but they're close to closing those polls, and then we'll have results for you guys. Bernie Sanders stands a very good chance of winning 3 out of 4 states this weekend, right? Now, he's not guaranteed those victories, and Hillary Clinton has a better chance of winning Louisiana than Bernie Sanders has of winning the states. He's likely to win Kansas, Nebraska, and Maine. So if she pulls off an upset in one of those states, well, then more momentum goes towards Hillary Clinton. You got to keep it real. That's what would happen if that is a scenario. Now, unfortunately, if he has the momentum and he wins those 3 out of 4 states, no one in the media will give him credit. I've already seen article on top of article saying that, well, those are more likely to be Bernie states, and they're caucuses, and caucuses are weird, and these are particularly weird caucuses, and and so all the reasons why it should be dismissed. In fact, I've seen a ton of coverage about the Republican elections in this weekend, justifiably. They're very interesting. There was an upset in Maine. There's nothing wrong with that. They should cover those, right? But almost no coverage of the Democratic side. You almost think, if you're scrolling through the websites, you'd almost think there wasn't a Democratic election this weekend, right? So, but yes, the Democratic Party is holding elections. Yes, Bernie Sanders is favored in them. But it appears that as soon as they're over, they're going to be immediately dismissed, right? Now, it's one thing if you say, oh, the southern states that Hillary Clinton won on Super Tuesday, which was almost all the states she won, right? She won Massachusetts by a very tiny margin, 1.4% or so.
1.4, I think.
Right?
But she won it by a
right, right. But the rest were southern states. Those, they matter a lot. She won Super Tuesday. She's inevitable, back on the track. It's definitely matters. Bernie wins 3 out of 4. Dismissed. That's if he wins it, by the way. So there is no good case scenario for him in the media. Like, if he wins, we knew he was going to win. By the way, they haven't happened yet. If you go to Nate Silver, you go to ask the others, are you positive he's going to win those 3 states? They would say, no, we're not positive, right? But the minute he wins them, they're going to be like, oh, we knew it. We know it. It's irrelevant. It's useless, right? So that disparity is maddening. Okay. Now, having said all that, previously we had all the polls going in Bernie Sanders' direction, including all the national polls, and he'd made up about a 50-point difference, which is unbelievable for a guy who had almost no name recognition, for people that didn't follow politics, versus Hillary Clinton that had the name recognition in about 100% of the country, right?
And a guy taking no corporate money.
And he doesn't take any corporate money, and how in the world did he catch up? That being said, recently, there have been national polls going in the other direction, with Hillary Clinton expanding her lead in some of those polls. So that is the case. And that is, for the first time, momentum going in her way over the last couple of weeks or so, okay? Now, and the wins she had on Super Tuesday were huge, as some people are prone to saying. They were larger than expected. I mean, we expected large wins for her. They were even larger than that, okay?
Yeah, like
also in South Carolina
yeah.
And in Nevada. We thought maybe it could be a tie and Bernie Sanders might even be able to win, but no, she won comfortably by 5. It wasn't a blowout, but she clearly won there, okay?
But he was down by about, 60 points in July in Nevada, and he loses by 5 points. My question is, you tell me who has momentum.
Okay, I hear you, Jimmy. But at some point, you got to win states. And he wins a lot of states. He won 4 on Super Tuesday, which again was immediately dismissed, right? He won New Hampshire in a blowout.
Well, you got to round down.
Right.
7 goes up to 10, 4 goes down to 0. So
right.
That's what I learned.
And this weekend, it looks like he's going to win some states. But the question is, Jimmy, does that momentum then lead him to actually winning the later states? And that question is going to be resolved one way or another on March 8th and March 15th. And this is what I've been saying for a long time on the Young Turks. March 15th is the most important date, not Super Tuesday. I said that at least a month ago, right? So there we have Florida, Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, and North Carolina. And on March 8th, we have Michigan. Yeah. Right now in the polls, Bernie Sanders is trailing significantly in those states. Now, will that momentum carry him to better numbers? That was the theory. If that theory holds, then yes, he's in great shape. But if that theory doesn't hold and she maintains those leads,
yeah.
Well, then it will be over. It is what it is, right? You have to call it as it actually is, not as you hope it is. So now, given that long prelude, where do we stand on Michigan right now?
Okay, so there have been 2 polls done in Michigan on the Democratic side so far in March. The most recent one from ARG has her up by 24. The one before that, which was Fox 2 Detroit, Mitchell had her up by 28.
So you gotta
pretty comfortable.
You gotta be realistic, man. There's not a lot of time before March 8th. It's coming up on Tuesday, and if those are anywhere near true, that's way too big a lead.
Yeah, and honestly, look, the PPP back in the around right in the halfway point in February had her up by 10.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like it's going in the other direction, as I was saying about the national polls. Whereas Bernie was closing in before, now the tide has swung a little bit in the opposite direction.
Looking at it, I would say that their poll was an outlier because polls right before and after had her up by 29 or 33.
Right, but I've seen other states as well where it seems like she's gained some. Now, if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, you say, well, that's partly because the media keeps screaming from every rooftop they have that it's over, she's inevitable, we quit already, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you're right about that, but nonetheless, they did do that, and he's got to win the states, and if he doesn't win the states, it will be over. So has the media treatment of Bernie Sanders been fundamentally unfair? I think I would be the leading proponent of that argument. That notwithstanding, it is what it is. And so right now, as things stand, unless Bernie Sanders can regain the momentum and have some upsets going forward, he's going to be in a world of trouble, right? Because the polling in those March 15 states don't look that good either, right? I kept waiting because there used to be old polls. And I dismissed the old polls because I said, look, man, that was before Iowa, New Hampshire, and all the other things that have happened. But the newer polls cannot be dismissed, right? And so we're going to have to see some movement there. Otherwise, there's going to be trouble by March 15th. Keeping it real, that's where we stand now. But also, it depends on if people go to show up to vote, as I said earlier, right? Registered voters, likely voters, that makes a big difference.
You keep saying this thing about March 15th, that this will be, first of all, Bernie's got a shit ton of money. He's not getting out after March 15th, no matter how March 15th turns out, because after March 15th, the calendar totally switches in his favor. And I mean, what do you think happens when if she wins this on super delegates?
Well,
No. I'm saying
basically one of the reasons. I'm not saying that I think necessarily March 15th is like do or die, but it's even if you think that gradually at this point he'll continue to have more support, the polls will be more in his favor. Each week that we go by is more and more people have already been exposed to his information, so it becomes a little bit harder for that to happen. And because there aren't big winner-take-all states, at a certain point, if he doesn't catch up and pass her, as long as she can get 45% of the delegates, then she can win. She could lose all the states as long as she loses them close. At a certain point, it doesn't even matter if she wins the states anymore, just because of the delegate lead.
I'm going to say it one more time. Those states have not voted yet, okay? And we thought Trump was going to win comfortably in Maine today, and it turns out he got beat pretty badly. So many things can happen, right? Now, having said that, Jimmy, you look, if he loses Michigan, and then he's very likely to lose North Carolina no matter what. But again, we'll see. But I'm being realistic. Then the more up in the state, Florida, Ohio, Illinois, which I consider to be up in the air more, based on the older polling. If he loses those, now two things are going to happen. One, the math that John is talking about. It's going to be very, very hard to catch up, if not nearly impossible, right? The second thing is, if you thought the media was dismissive now, wait till you see them after March 15th. If it goes in that direction, and at that point they would have some justification to do it, okay? They won't be talking about New York or California. They won't be talking about any polling in any of those states. Every mention of Bernie Sanders will almost contain a dismissive and disdainful hiss. Like, what is he still doing in the race?
Is this the day
what
he gets out?
What is wrong with him? And then you'll have a cacophony of people saying he's just helping the Republicans by staying in the race. Now, having said that, he's got every right to do it. He's got plenty of money. And guess what? As we were talking live, he just won the state of Kansas.
Wow.
We're just calling it right now. Bernie Sanders won the state of Kansas. I'm getting this from CNN. Immediately dismissed. It turns out it doesn't count. It's too white. It's too weird. And it's too pro-Bernie.
Yeah, I mean, we'd been seeing reports.
I'm sorry, Joe, one more thing on that. How funny is it that the press now says, well, it's obvious that the most liberal senator in the country would win one of the most conservative states in in the nation.
It's obvious.
Now, I know, of course, it's the Democrats voting in the Democratic primary. It's not all of Kansas. But you would think that conservative states would be more in favor of conservative Democrats, right? But the guy who's by far the most, they say he's too socialist, he's too far left, and obviously he was going to win Kansas.
It's not that it's irrelevant that he won. It's that it's weird.
It's weird.
It's weird. So let's not think about it or talk about it at all. Look, and as of from the 19th of February to the 26th of February, a week-long period, the last poll had Clinton up by 10.
In Kansas?
As of about 2.5 weeks ago, yeah.
In Kansas?
Yeah.
And
yes, that's the only poll that I'm seeing.
And as soon as Kansas polls closed, it was called for Bernie Sanders, meaning that he crushed. He won easily. There's no dispute.
So
you don't
what
have to worry
happened?
about precincts reporting.
So what happened? The polls were wrong, or that
Well,
was
it's a caucus, and he's expected that he should do well in caucuses.
in caucuses?
Yeah, he's got a great ground game. He has money to run ads pretty much anywhere, so he could be sort of. I mean, he doesn't really need to be selective, but he can drench the marketplace in the weeks leading up. Yeah, and it's been a few weeks since the polls. It's possible a combination of little factors. Now, I had seen people giving some of the early individual precinct results, implying that he was going to win throughout the last couple of hours. And some people were showing in some particular precincts oddly high numbers of absentee ballots coming in, only for one side. So at one point, Hillary, they had the absentee and then the regular. So in the regular, Bernie had like 280, she had like 240. So he beat her. And then the absentee, he had like 39 votes, she had 260 votes.
Now, I saw online, and again, look, this is
Who knows?
look, it's just take this with a giant grain of salt.
Yeah.
But I saw people saying that the Hillary Clinton people are going to the nursing homes, knowing that the older voters are more likely to vote for Hillary Clinton, and passing out, absentee ballots at the nursing homes. And people think that's a dirty trick.
No, I think
I
that's
don't think
fine.
so.
I think that's fine.
I think that's good, hard politicking, right? If you think that.
It's a legal vote. It's a legal vote.
Yeah, and Bernie could go and pass out
the same
absentee
thing.
ballots at universities. So I don't get into that. And besides which, she won Kansas easily. So last thing on this is, look, if that Kansas poll that John just told you about gives you all you need to know on both sides of this issue. On the one side, and not both sides of the issue, but the two different things we've been talking about. On the one side is this media bias. Now, and you can see, we just called it right now as we're covering it live, right? Now, you'll see tomorrow what the press does. And you'll go look at it, whatever sites you go to all the general sites, whatever you want, right? And they will say, oh, well, Bernie was always going to win Kansas. Even though there was a poll out 2 weeks ago, the last poll we had in Kansas, saying she's up by 10. They'll say it, watch. I'm telling you ahead of time, right? And so that when you see it with your own eyes, you'll say, oh my God, he was right. He did tell us ahead of time, right? They will say, oh, he was always going to win Kansas. When he was losing by 10 points 2 weeks ago, according to the polling, right? So that's phenomenon number one. And phenomenon number two is, look, if he's losing by 10 or whatever he is, and they vary widely, right? In Ohio or Illinois or Florida, well, is it possible that in 10 days that polling could also be off and there could be momentum shifts, especially if he wins 3 out of 4 in this weekend? And by the way, that's why the media coverage is important. If they say, oh my God, Bernie Sanders won 3 out of 4, it seems like he's got momentum. If they go, oh, he won 3 out of 4, but it's, don't worry about it, then he won't have momentum, right? Or as much momentum as he deserves. So we'll have to see. But we're here to share the facts with you guys so you know what's actually going on.